Hey guys, Jason here, and this is not a lens I recommend anymore, despite everything I thought I liked about this lens when I first got it. In reality, it's a niche lens, it's a specialty lens, and in terms of overall function and versatility, it's expensive for what you get. Now look, that's cool and all, and in the duration of this video, I'll be breaking down why that's the case, and I'll show y'all examples to back up my points. But at the same time, y'all are probably wondering why I even bought this lens in the first place, and why I made a super favorable review of it about 2.5 years ago when I got it. And to be completely fair, and I gotta address this, it's because I was a noob at photography. I was a complete noob, and before I got my first camera, I had a basic understanding of photography principles and controls, and I knew enough to know that aperture was something you kind of wanted to focus on, no pun intended, and that it yielded more light coming into the camera with a bigger aperture, better bokeh, more depth, and overall is an important aspect of photography. And that's what motivated me to want a super wide lens the second I had a camera to use it with. The problem though, as you probably picked up on by now, is that I just neglected every other lens specification out there. So the glass quality, which directly affects the image quality, the focal length, autofocus, stabilization of the lens, all that totally ignored when I bought this guy back around 2.5 years ago for $150. But as is the theme and message of this video, I learned over the years that this lens is not a good overall lens, especially a budget lens. If anything, it's a specialty lens. And let me go ahead and start explaining why. So at f1.1, if you want to take a picture of a coffee cup on a table at, let's just say, an average distance or a couple feet away from it, you could blur out, and you would blur out, 90% of the picture, everything in the background, and part of the cup, except for the rim that is close to you. And that, just to begin with and to start things, is artistically dumb. There's no reason you need that much focal contrast, and it's just a ridiculous spec for that. Now, of course, it becomes a lot more practical when you back up, and your subject's further away from the camera, and the depth, the perception of depth goes down significantly. But then you notice that this lens at f1.1, and this is really in any situation, is just incredibly soft. And when I take pictures, you can't deal with this. I mean, inherently, it results in a loss of information just because it's a little bit blurred. You can never get it perfectly in focus. But with pictures, you can kind of work around it and sharpen up the picture, throw in some noise reduction, some color noise reduction in Lightroom, and things will look pretty good. But the thing is, when I take video, I can't really do that with Vegas, and so I'll end up just having to stop down to f2, which, as you can see, is just wasting the fact that this lens can go up to f1.1. The f1.1, again, close range is not practical. Further away, it's still really soft and tough to work with. You lose detail either way. And really, in any situation, no matter whether you're shooting pictures or video, there's obvious drawbacks to shooting at f1.1, and that's a big deal for a lens of which the heft of the appeal and honestly the price you're paying is that big freaking aperture. Next, this lens has a 50mm focal length and only manual focus. Two things that I think really just slash the versatility factor of this lens. Now, first off, the 50mm focal length. It works for some people, works for some photographers and some environments, but look, I'm shooting in my room most of the time, and the view that you get out of this camera once you pop that f1.1 on is just claustrophobic. It doesn't really work for the environment that I shoot in just because the subject is so incredibly zoomed in, and then the background is blurry and just completely gone. This is easier to show than explain in words, so let me just jump between the view from my kit lens at 14mm to my 25mm prime lens, not the Kumlan, and then to the Kumlan f1.1 at its 50mm. It's a huge difference, and for me, when, like I said, I'm shooting in my room most of the time, which is a pretty confined space, 50mm is just not practical. And secondly, of course, being manual focus is a disadvantage of its own, essentially making your workflow and your process 10 times slower and just more difficult anytime you go out to shoot. And this is one of those things that once I got the 25mm prime lens, it's the one that I compared and I showed you all in the comparison, Once I got that lens that actually did have autofocus, I was just thinking back to how much faster and better it made my workflow compared to the Kamlan lens. Doing stuff like setting up the autofocus to work with the G7's face tracking for A-roll just makes A-roll really hard to mess up when it comes to focus. And doing those shots where things just kind of come into focus smoothly, you know what I'm talking about, where the background first is in focus and it just shifts to the foreground and the subject. That's so much easier with tap to focus with an autofocus lens, because you tap 2 times and you got a perfect shot, as opposed to trying to rotate that ring, not shake the camera, and get everything perfectly where you want it. So autofocus is a really nice thing to have in a lens, and this guy doesn't have it. And it's important to note that this f1.7 25mm lens with autofocus that I'm talking about and using to diss the Kamlan in comparison is not some crazy expensive lens. It's not even more than the Kamlan lens. It's 150 bucks. I think the Kamlan actually has gone up in price since I originally bought it. So we're talking equivalent price point lenses here when I talk about this stuff, and the fact that the lens I got later is just so much better than the Kamlan. Okay, so those 3 points were the main reasons that I came to the conclusion that my 150 bucks was not well spent on this lens. But look, here's the thing. When you use a piece of tech or gear of any kind for an extended period of time, you'll just determine over time that even if it annoys you, that it has some good redeeming factors about it and some good character quality traits, if that makes sense. And that is the case with this lens. I do want to talk about that a little bit. That was actually the case a couple months ago when I did my quarantine photo shoot in my front yard. You don't know where I am, but it's outside my window right there. I popped this lens out and put it on my camera, and everything kind of worked for this particular situation. The 50mm focal length, I wanted the background gone, so the claustrophobia thing didn't matter. It was helping to put the focus on me with all the pear blossoms around me. The f1.1 deal, I was able to get more bokeh and actually ended up doing the sharpening thing with noise reduction in post, which worked out fine. And also, if you haven't noticed by now, this lens has its own characteristic bokeh. It's swirly, it's really not structured, and I like that effect. It really added to the dreaminess of this photo, and it's something that the 25mm prime lens doesn't have. It's really structured. The f1.7 lens, again, is sharp at f1.7. The bokeh is really just spherical structured. But the Kamlan does have its own kind of unique flavor to its bokeh, so that all those different things combined did help create a pretty cool shot in that situation. But the thesis of this video is that situation that I just talked about. It's actually very, very rare that I'll bust out the Kamlan and take it with me when I'm shooting footage or anything, or use it at all, period. Again, it's not something that I get a lot of use out of. So the situation where I enjoy this lens is very, very rare. That's the reason I made this video. It's not a good pickup in terms of the features you get and the functionality you get at its price point. There's better lenses out there. But this has been a Jason R public service announcement. Hopefully you got some information out of this. Helped you come to a more educated, better purchase decision for whatever your needs are right now. Thanks for being here. Subscribe down below. I'll see you in the next one.